Greetings Cybertronians, I'm DrLockdown and today we're tackling another brick-based product sample. However, this time it's going to be something a little different. You see, today we're taking a look at a sample from LesDIY, and this company differs in the sense that it's not a standard brick building company. No, rather it's a bunch of smaller designers submitting their works towards a generalized website. Fully democratized brick-based design. It's sort of like the old system LEGO Digital Designer functioned on. Anyone who works at the company can submit basically anything. Within reason. This gives us today's product, a bathhouse, but not just any bathhouse. Fans of Hayao Miyazaki's work will quickly recognize this as the famous bathhouse that acted as the backdrop of the Academy Award-winning 2001 masterpiece Spirited Away, a truly delightful movie with scenery that could be considered a character in itself. If you haven't seen the film, do yourself a favor and give it a watch. It's absolutely wonderful. Now, of course, rendering the scenery in brick-based detail is all well and good, but there's a bit of a side effect you get stuck with before you reach that point. The builds. As LesDIY is more of a conglomerate of different designers providing higher payouts to each than most companies on the market, this means that each set is made to order. As a result, you end up with certain quirks in the builds. For starters, no numbered bags. You get a bunch of parts and that's essentially what you're dealing with. The pieces are separated, but some of the combinations of pieces can be a bit confusing, so it may be a better idea to invest in a separation case and get into your own rhythm. I only figured this out halfway through, so the build was difficult for the first half. Fortunately, most of the instructions are pretty simple, so overall it was an enjoyable experience, just a longer one than usual. This I can sort of cut some slack as these are, again, made to order. What I will criticize, however, is the instructions. You're only provided with digital ones, which is fine, but I frequently ran into issues with these. Beyond the colors being wildly off, forcing me to cross-reference the box to see what they actually meant, they're also filled with countless errors. It's clear this is algorithmically generated without adjustments made after the fact. The pieces are often obscured by others and you'll have to infer things. Piece counts in steps will often be inaccurate. You'll have to disassemble parts to fit others in, and they have that awful floating brick glitch that was ever present in LEGO Digital Designer and older versions of Stud.io. OG brick builders will know the one. I mean, on the very first page, you can already see the issues taking form. That's not a good sign of things to come. Ultimately, it was an enjoyable build, simply because it wasn't filled with layers and layers of bullshit like previously reviewed samples. But it does have issues I'd like to see ironed out in future releases of the company, or at least revisions of older products. I recognize separated brick bags are likely beyond their scope, as much as I'd love them to be included, but the instructions definitely do need some work going forwards. The build itself, however, is wonderfully rendered in exquisite detail. It comes together almost like an architecture set, with all of the micro details and scenes from the film captured in small pieces. The piece count is very high, but the model fits quite well. I do love massive, crazy, wicked builds, but something like this is also a very nice change of pace. The base section is delightful, using a similar waterfront technique to the Zen Garden set that came out a while ago. You know the one. The actual pigments on show are really lovely, even if the instructions don't capture them very well. Pigment desaturation is always something I look out for in brick sets, and this set seems to be doing extremely well. I think only the red is a little dull, as far as all the parts go, and it's embedded into the design enough that you don't particularly notice it. I absolutely adore the greebling on the sides. It's all uneven and cragged with bits sticking out. It really feels like a lived-in place, matching the sheer vibe of the original design perfectly. I think one of my favorite bits is how they do the stairs. It's so simple, yet so charming. Jammed in there with all the pipework, it really looks cozy. I'm not entirely sure how accurate the back section is, as I've seen a lot of conflicting artwork depicting it, but it's still done really well regardless. I've always loved the way the pagoda aesthetic is brought to life in brick form. Each designer tackles it a little differently, and it's always really interesting. The grill pieces as windows are a nice way of getting the slits conveyed. Another thing that really sells this as a glorified architecture set. Capping it off with the bridge at the front, which, yes, unfortunately you do have to cut the tubing yourself, but it's fine. This thing really makes a wonderful display piece. It's not ridiculously oversized and it's not so tiny and insignificant either. It just works. It even has a bunch of functionality at the back, where you can open and see a good chunk of the interior. It's not every room, but it's enough so that it doesn't feel like the building is just a facade. They're crafted very well, from the banquet room to the baths to Kamaji's boiler room down the bottom, though obviously not to scale. Hypothetically, you're supposed to be able to take these levels apart and display them separately, but the grill pieces they have use more studs than the instructions claim to, providing evidence that maybe different pieces were substituted in the final builds. I don't think it's a deal breaker though, just some of the functionality seemed intentional at first, but sadly doesn't work. If I did have to criticize anything, a lot of the build doesn't seem very secure. Given the democratization of the design process, there's probably not a lot of testing going on. And although I haven't come across too many illegal building techniques on show, many of the parts just aren't properly held down. I can't even get some of the bits back in place because the rest of the design is so carefully crafted around specific clearances. Great for the build process, but there had to be a better way to do this. While most of the design is exhibitant of designer pedigree. Yeah, some of these pieces feel like something I would have done back in high school, especially the spire at the top. Come on, this should be better. Overall, this is a remarkable set with a few issues you need to know going in. It's not something you can go into expecting a fully formed store-grade product. Think of it more as getting a handcrafted Etsy set, just in unlicensed brick form. And there's a wonderful charm to that. It's clear the folks behind LesDIY are passionate about their work, and if you know what you're getting into, you'll find plenty of love here. This is one I'll most certainly keep around, given my affinity for the media in question. If you're interested in grabbing the sets, links will be in the description. Anyway, that's it from me. See you next week for when we finally finish what I started in December. Hopefully. Time is the bane of us all.